All right, folks, welcome back. Hour number 2 of the Steve Malzberg Show. The president expected to make a statement. Actually, he's now 3 minutes late, and, you know, he's been 45, 50 minutes late in the past, so there's no telling when that statement will be forthcoming. We're not sure what it's about. We expect it'll be about Russia's incursion into Ukraine and possibly ISIS as well. And we'll be joined by White House correspondent for Newsmax, John Gizzi, momentarily. I do want to tell you that it's very rare that you hear somebody in this day and age in the public eye say, I was wrong. Well, I didn't get it right. Those are the words of the NFL commissioner who suspended Ray Rice of the Baltimore Ravens for 2 games for allegedly, and there was, allegedly punching his then fiance. You might recall the video of that. He dragged her unconscious. As she was unconscious, he dragged her out of the elevator. It was at a casino, a hotel, I believe, in Atlantic City, if I'm not mistaken. Bottom line, he got such criticism after that because you could get suspended for a full season for smoking pot in the NFL, but he had only 2 games, did Ray Rice, for allegedly punching and knocking out his then fiance. So commissioner now says, I got it wrong. I did not get it right. The new policy, from the best I can understand, reportedly includes up to a 6-game suspension from now on for domestic abuse or violence, and a second offense could lead to expulsion from the NFL. So, you know, good for the commissioner for saying I got it wrong, because he certainly got it wrong. Certainly got it wrong. And it took him a long time to admit it, but he did admit it, and that's what counts. All right, do we have John Gizzi? Let's go to John Gizzi, Newsmax White House correspondent. No, we're still looking for him. Okay, folks. The president, originally we had heard that the president was going to have a meeting on ISIS with his national security team at 4 o'clock Eastern time. It's now 4:05 Eastern time. That's then changed to the president would make a statement at 4 o'clock Eastern time, and we don't know. As a matter of fact, there's a very good chance that John Gizzi is in that White House briefing room and is going to be unable to join us because of his responsibilities as White House correspondent for Newsmax. When the president speaks, if he speaks in this segment, we will attempt here to bring it to you live. I'm pretty sure we'll be able to get that done. But again, you know, back on August 8th, Samantha Power, our UN ambassador, said at that time, as there were convoys ready to cross from Russia into Ukraine with the supposedly humanitarian contents in their convoy, that if that convoy crossed the border, we, the United States, would consider that an invasion, an incursion into Ukraine by Russia. And so what happened today? As we discussed in the previous hour, we have reportedly 1,000 Russian soldiers making that trek, crossing over. And according to our guests, we had the chief analyst for Lignet, Fred Fleitz, and we had General Paul E. Vallely. Fred saying that the Russians want to make enclaves for the Russian separatists in Ukraine, want to create a road that goes from Kiev into Russia, and that this might be phase 2. All right, it looks like the president, no, you never know. You never know what's going to happen. People stirred, but still nobody at the podium now at 4:07 p.m. Eastern time. But we'll keep focused on that for you, and as soon as the president comes in. Now, is he going to say something about this latest Russian incursion, this military movement by the Russian troops? And if he says something, what is he going to say? What is he going to say, and what can he say? Is he going to talk about increased sanctions? Is he going to talk about the world will not tolerate this? Is he going to talk about repercussions for Vladimir Putin? I mean, we've heard this song before, if in fact the president is going to address this in his statement coming up moments from now. Is he going to address the ISIS situation? What has changed on the ground in the past few days or since his last statement regarding ISIS that would be of note and newsworthy enough for him to call this the media together in the briefing room for a statement. So I'm leaning towards the Russian troops heading in, and the president will be meeting with his NATO counterparts in the not-too-distant future. Is this a situation that NATO will be taking up? Is there any chance that NATO will take any action? I don't know. But of course, when you're talking about Russia and you're talking about that region, you're talking about not Ukraine specifically as a NATO member, but you're talking about NATO members in that region. And you're talking about countries like Poland, NATO members that have had their air defenses removed, their missile defenses removed by Barack Obama, basically at the behest of Vladimir Putin. And it would certainly be a message if Barack Obama would come to the podium today and say this is intolerable, this will not be taken lightly, and we will protect our allies in the region, and that includes new air defenses. Here's the President of the United States. Okay, well, if we don't have audio, we don't need to see him. Okay, folks, we don't have audio of the President of the United States. I apologize for that. We will let you know. Right now, he is, well, he will take questions. So this is going to be, as the Labor Day weekend comes, he said that he will take questions leading into the weekend. Okay, he's talking about second quarter investment by companies and economic statistics. So he's leading with the economy. He's leading with the economy, which, you know, I really don't understand. But now I'm told we do have audio. Let's try to pick that up.
To protect Americans there and to address the humanitarian situation on the ground. As Commander-in-Chief, I will always do what is necessary to protect the American people and defend against evolving threats to our homeland. Because of our strikes, the terrorists of ISIL are losing arms and equipment. In some areas, Iraqi government and Kurdish forces have begun to push them back, and we continue to be proud and grateful to our extraordinary personnel serving in this mission. Now, ISIL poses an immediate threat to the people of Iraq and to people throughout the region. And that's why our military action in Iraq has to be part of a broader, comprehensive strategy to protect our people and to support our partners who are taking the fight to ISIL. And that starts with Iraq's leaders building on the progress that they've made so far and forming an inclusive government that will unite their country and strengthen their security forces to confront ISIL. Any successful strategy, though, also needs strong regional partners. I'm encouraged so far that countries in the region, countries that don't always agree on many things, increasingly recognize the primacy of the threat that ISIL poses to all of them. And I've asked Secretary Kerry to travel to the region to continue to build the coalition that's needed to meet this threat. As I've said, rooting out a cancer like ISIL will not be quick or easy, but I'm confident that we can and we will, working closely with our allies and our partners. For our part, I've directed Secretary Hagel and our Joint Chiefs of Staff to prepare a range of options. I'll be meeting with my National Security Council again this evening as we continue to develop that strategy. And I've been consulting with members of Congress, and I'll continue to do so in the days ahead. Finally, I just spoke with Chancellor Merkel of Germany on the situation in Ukraine. We agree, if there was ever any doubt, that Russia is responsible for the violence in eastern Ukraine. The violence is encouraged by Russia. The separatists are trained by Russia. They are armed by Russia. They are funded by Russia. Russia has deliberately and repeatedly violated the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. And the new images of Russian forces inside Ukraine make that plain for the world to see. This comes as Ukrainian forces are making progress against the separatists. Now, as a result of the actions Russia has already taken and the major sanctions we've imposed with our European and international partners, Russia is already more isolated than at any time since the end of the Cold War. Capital is fleeing, investors are increasingly staying out, its economy is in decline, and this ongoing Russian incursion into Ukraine will only bring more costs and consequences for Russia. Next week, I'll be in Europe to coordinate with our closest allies and partners. In Estonia, I will reaffirm our unwavering commitment to the defense of our NATO allies. At the NATO summit in the United Kingdom, we'll focus on the additional steps we can take to ensure the alliance remains prepared for any challenge. Our meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Commission will be another opportunity for our alliance to continue our partnership with Ukraine, and I look forward to reaffirming the unwavering commitment of the United States to Ukraine and its people when I welcome President Poroshenko to the White House next month. So, with that, I'm going to take a few questions, and I'm going to start with somebody who I guess is now a big cheese. He's moved on, but I understand this is going to be his last chance to ask me a question in the press room. So I want to congratulate Chuck Todd and give him first dibs.
I'm glad you said in the press room. Let me start with Syria. The decision that you have to make between, first of all, is it a if or when situation about going after ISIL in Syria? Can you defeat ISIL or ISIS without going after them in Syria? And then how do you prioritize? You've said that Assad has lost legitimacy to lead. Defeating ISIS could help Assad keep power. Talk about how you prioritize those two pieces of your foreign policy.
Well, first of all, I want to make sure everybody's clear on what we're doing now, because it is limited. Our focus right now is to protect American personnel on the ground in Iraq, to protect our embassy, to protect our consulates, to make sure that critical infrastructure that could adversely affect our personnel is protected. Where we see an opportunity that allows us, with very modest risk, to help the humanitarian situation there, as we did in Sinjar Mountain, we will take those opportunities after having consulted with Congress. But our core priority right now is just to make sure that our folks are safe and to do an effective assessment of Iraqi and Kurdish capabilities. As I said, I think in the last press conference, in order for us to be successful, we've got to have an Iraqi government that is unified and inclusive. So we are continuing to push them to get that job done. As soon as we have an Iraqi government in place, the likelihood of the Iraqi security forces being more effective in taking the fight to ISIL significantly increases.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to the President of the United States here on the Steve Malzberg Show on Newsmax Television. Joining us now is White House correspondent for Newsmax, John Gizzi. John, great to talk to you again, sir. It's been way too long. The timing couldn't be better, at least for us. I mean, I'm sure you need to hear more of what the President's saying. But in answer to his Chuck Todd question here, he's reiterating what he said earlier on in his opening remarks, and he's reiterating what he said from the very beginning, and it really gets under my skin. Our mission against ISIS is to protect American personnel and our embassies. Where there's moderate risk, we will help in a humanitarian effort. But the people of Iraq have to fight ISIS. The government has to be more inclusive. It's the same, to me, short-sighted lack of understanding about the threat that ISIS poses beyond the immediate Iraq area and to the United States. I don't get it.
Well, if this were not such a serious matter and the loss of lives, both Iraqi and American and other countries, very much on the table, I'd say we've seen this movie before. There is nothing new in the President's remarks. The city of ISIL is strong. An inclusive government is a critical necessity, and American lives are at risk. Again, all important, but nothing new. It would have been nice, for example, to hear about a strong effort, perhaps with some European allies, in arming the Kurds, and particularly their Peshmerga fighters, who are quite adept at dealing with ISIS, as we've seen on the battlefield so far. But again, no specifics or details on that yet. I think you're going to hear about this much more next week when Congress returns after Labor Day.
Yeah, and you're right. It would have been nice to have heard something. The Kurds have been seeking heavy weapons from us. in order to take on ISIS, as they have done successfully at different turns, as you alluded to. Nothing about that. And he keeps talking as if this crisis, this horrific a bunch of animals that cut off people's heads, and we've seen it on the video of our own journalist, that if only Iraq includes more Sunnis in their parliament, ISIS will say, oh, okay, we don't want to kill Christians or anybody else anymore. I mean, the naivete that's at least expressed by the president is, to me, astounding.
Well, remember one other thing. Every pronouncement that comes out of ISIS is about the caliphate, the superstate which, in the long run, would include Iraq and Syria and eventually stretch to Jordan and Lebanon and, yes, Israel. But more importantly, it would be a petrostate, to use a term that John Hanna, former national security advisor to Vice President Cheney, told me 2 days ago. ISIS has seized the central bank of Iraq with $400 million. Its major target are the refineries, primarily in the northern part of Iraq, and that will give them the oil as well as the money to wreak havoc far beyond their borders.
You know, he reached the crisis in Ukraine briefly at the end of his opening statement, basically saying that, there's no doubt, as if there were any, is what he actually said. I'm paraphrasing, as if there were ever any doubt. We are 100% convinced that Russia is behind the pro-Russian rebels in eastern Ukraine. They're responsible for the violence. Well, we knew all that. Now we have 1,000 troops in Ukraine. We have a Russian invasion. And he's saying, well, Russia's more isolated than they've ever been since the Cold War, and we're going to continue that. I know his options are a lot less when it comes to Russia, but it just seems like, making that third behind the economy and ISIS, I guess, is very telling, no?
No, it's very telling, and it also comes at a time when the European Union has yet to act decisively, although it continues to move on the front of sanctions. But just today, President Hollande of France had his foreign policy statement in which he said that there would be no French troops in Ukraine until there were Russian troops coming into Europe at this point. The EU has yet to act. And interestingly, there have been EU patrol missions in Moldova since the early part of the last decade, in Georgia since 2008, and now they're virtually denying that a hot spot is existing, a choke point, if you will, in Ukraine right now. So again, with 1,000 troops there, the U.S. is going it alone militarily.
Let me just add one thing. The president, I've just been told, he has just said in answer to a question, we don't have a strategy yet on ISIS. He just said this. He just said those words. He said, I've heard news reports, and it seems like people are getting a little bit ahead of themselves, suggesting that we do, suggesting that we're preparing this action or that action. But why would the president of the United States stand up there and say, well, and by the way, if it's true, it's pathetic. But why would he say, we don't have a strategy on ISIS yet?
When those words came down, Steve, a lot of us who have covered the president for a long time and covered this administration felt vindicated, because so many have concluded that the administration does not speak with one voice and coordinated action. The president says that we don't have a strategy against ISIS yet, and yet just a week ago, his own Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, said ISIS was a clear and present danger, a major threat. That's 180 degrees different from the president's earlier statement likening them to a junior varsity team. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming in just the grounds, the money that they've seized in the military action. ISIS is light years ahead of al-Qaeda and a greater threat.
What about the pending executive action? When do you think the amnesty executive order, so-called amnesty order, which Gutierrez once again told us the other day, brace yourself, it's coming. You think he's going to do that before the midterms, or you think he's going to wait and do it after?
What I think he will do before the midterms, to be very specific, is something that's a little different with amnesty and will have big leaps. 2 days ago, I was at a meeting for reporters at the headquarters of the AFL-CIO. And what the union is calling for is executive action for President Obama to protect those who are, as they put it, undocumented workers in low-paying jobs within the United States, to protect them from possible deportation, which their bosses threat. They say there are 8 million to 11 million such workers in this country. So I do believe, based on the fact that President Trumka of the AFL-CIO and its legal team are very strongly behind this, and they have the president's ear, and it's an election year, the president will simply say that organized labor can motivate and get these people out, and that this is the way to go, which is an executive order protecting 8 to 11 million workers here illegally from any deportation. And then they'll go from there. And that will be something that will reward labor in time for the election and motivate them.
All right, John.
I'll have an article on that in Newsmax next week.
All right, John, we'll look for it. Thank you so much, sir. Always great to talk to you. We don't do it often enough, but we will. Newsmax's John Gizzi, ladies and gentlemen, White House correspondent, as the president still answering questions at his impromptu news conference following an opening statement regarding the economy, ISIS, and Russia. We'll be back with more on the Steve Malzberg Show.